Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Two Geeks Talking is an entertainment industry interview show where we interview the creative people from the comic, film, TV, movie, and video game industries, and of course the occasional author as well, which will segue into our guest here. I'm your host, Kurt Sasso, and of course on episode 373, we're joined by a very talented author. We've had a few on the show in the past, and I'm glad to add yet another one to the ever-growing list of creative people. It is what it is. But joining us today from Midwest United States, we're joined by Katie Berger Tremaine, author of Independent Flight. I think that's the title. How are you doing today, Katie?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing?
I'm alive. I'm awake. I'm doing what I can to try and stay awake, for that matter. Um,
Yeah.
our mutual friend Steve Savage brought me on to your work, and I started going through it. I started looking through Independent Flight, and as well as your blog as well. Um,
hmm
for those that have never been able to read your work or seen you online, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, I've okay. I'm about to date myself just a little bit, but when I was really, when I was pretty young, I started watching Star Trek: The Next Generation, and I've been a nerd ever since. I do kind of take that title, nerd. I feel like, um, I mean, I like the title geek, but it also kind of feels a little bit like we're nerds who don't want to say we're nerds. So
Well, I can't change the title of my show now.
I know. I'm not impugning the title of your show. I'm just saying that there's well, maybe it's like geek has developed a little bit more credibility than nerd, but I like calling myself a nerd.
You can call me whatever you like, just don't call me late for dinner when it comes down to it.
Yeah.
No, I can understand that the moniker can be positive and negative. It's more positive now. It's not as
Mhm.
bad as it was back in the day, because I was one of those geeks nerds where I was in a computer science class, and I was
Mhm.
in band, and I was in football as well. So I was like triple threat right there. They didn't know where to
Yeah.
categorize me. So fun stuff.
Yeah, it's my trip into writing. I was in computer science when I was younger, and after a disastrous first trip through college that I don't really want to talk too much about, I realized that I was basically in computer science because I wanted to tell stories, and that was the wrong
Hmm.
way for me to tell stories. I'm a better writer than I am a computer scientist, so I went back. Um, I went back in 2010 and started to go to school for a creative writing degree.
Nice, good stuff. I'm dating myself a little bit as well. I remember Next Generation, and I remember all of that stuff. And hey, good shows. Don't get me wrong. I enjoyed Picard more so than a fellow Canadian with Captain Kirk, but it is what it is. So.
hmm Yeah, I think that really, honestly, Picard, Cisco, and even Janeway
Mhm.
are better and more real characters than Jim Kirk was, and I think part of that is the effective era because we expected different things in the 80s and 90s from storytelling than we did in the 60s.
Yeah. No, I completely agree, and you also continue that process of looking at stories, especially with Independent Flight, which I'd like to get into as
Mhm.
well. Um, but with your blog too, uh, I believe in the green room you mentioned that you graduated with computers with your creative writing, which congratulations, that's a great degree. But you also minored in feminist theory, or was it just a minor in feminism? I'm
It's
sorry.
just a minor in women's
Well,
studies.
women's. I apologize. Sorry, I get those
It's
confused.
okay.
We'll talk about that then. How is that uh, added to your creative writing then?
Um, my women's studies degree added to my creative writing in that I've always been uh, obvi- obviously growing up at obviously growing up as a queer woman in American society,
Hmm.
are you're aware of things in a different way than men are. And this is not to say that men's awareness of things is let well, it is incomplete in the sense that you're centered in society in a way that people in other groups might not be. Um, one of my friends, I'm one of my friends, Julia Serrano, and I'm kind of name dropping her for for people who have a background in women's studies and transgender studies, is
Hmm.
that she's said, and I think she was repeating from other people, that the center doesn't have to be aware of the edges have to be aware of the center.
Hmm.
So you come to that understanding from the position of, I am not in the center of society, but I need to know how the center of society is moving in order to in order to move with it and not be either run over or left behind.
Makes sense. And I can agree that we as the men of society or whatever, just as a generalization, we're not observant. Not as much as we'd like to think we are, but
Mhm.
when it comes to writing and when it comes to your blog in particular, though, you have some great points overall in terms of making people aware of things that they
Mhm.
might have just simply glossed over as well, too.
Mhm. Yeah, my most recent post, which was um, an adaptation from a paper that I wrote for my women's studies senior seminar, is that there are issues that mainstream science fiction doesn't talk about, like what happens to people who are left behind on Earth after humanity goes to the stars. How do we continue to have a duty to care for people who are on planets at the bottom of a gravity well when the attention of humanity is elsewhere?
Hmm. Interesting.
Because yeah, I mean, we always want to push further and further outward as we explore the universe, and the planets that we live on, both Earth and the other planets that we're going to, those are going to have those issues, and they're not going to go away just because we can get to another planet.
Yeah, it's almost just like you mentioned, though. It'll be the planets on the outside looking towards Earth as the center. What will they bring through? What will they bring over? What will they, what culture, what religion, if needed, or what basis
Mhm.
of society are they willing to, after all of these years that they've been so focused on infighting, so focused on trying to make some areas work while others aren't necessarily blending well. What
Mhm.
will they do in to the stars and into those ecosystems?
Yeah.
But that's more environmental than anything. But a lot of
Yeah.
a lot of that writing though that you have ties into your book Independent Flight as well, though.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of inevitable with an author in the late stages of, in the late stages of getting a book out. Independent Flight is coming out on the 2nd of June. It'll be available on Amazon and hopefully in some bookstores at least, because every author wants to see their work on a bookstore shelf. And Amazon is wonderful, and it's done wonders um, for my first short story, but it's not the same as being able to pick up a book on a store shelf and say, I did this, this is me.
Like the book in your hand.
Hmm. Yeah. And, um, you know, in my first book, I'm doing a lot with the space flight aspects, but as I get further and further into the series, I plan to tie it back to the planets because ultimately the people in the Interstellar Navy are protecting the planet, protecting the people who live on the planets below.
Mm. Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what about when it comes to characters, though? I think a lot of stories, a lot of authors, they focus on an interest, a love interest. They focus on a
Mm-hmm.
slight conflict. Your writing seems to you're focused more on strong female characters, very similar to I think a mutual friend and respected colleague, Gail Simone, does with her work as
Mm-hmm.
well too. So it's great to see that other people are actually still are doing this, and rightly so.
Yeah, I a couple of my friends have compared Captain Gray to Honor Harrington, and with due respect to David Weber, I hope that Veronica is not quite as verbose as Honor is. I love I love Honor to pieces, but I do not identify with the way she talks.
Oh. So when you were creating Veronica, then what type of voice were you trying to give her?
Um, I mean, that's actually a hard thing to because last summer at Convergence in Minneapolis, um, I went to a panel called Writing Realistic Dialogue,
Hmm.
and that's kind of it's the voice that I want to bring through for her is the voice of somebody who doesn't always talk in high diction, who jokes around, who has a she's got a few nervous habits. She plays with the braid on her cuffs when she's nervous because it feels to me like that's a realistic thing to do.
Hmm.
You know, you're not always you're not always the invincible space captain. You've got your little ticks and twitches, but really when the stuff hits the fan, she is as brave and as bold as anybody else who's ever been the captain of a starship in any other novel. So I think that people who are going to look for her are people like to see who like to see their space heroes with a dash of humanity and a dash of maybe I'm not the best person out there, but damn it, I'm going to try.
Hmm. Then as an author and uh, maybe a new published author in that regard,
Mm-hmm.
what personal challenges did you have to face not only in putting your characters together, but getting the book out there?
Um, Getting the book out there, as an indie author, it's all about making connections with other authors and with other people and with readers. Um, I could name drop half a dozen authors I've talked to in the last year. Um, ultimately, it's just you need to have relationships with other people, or it's not going anywhere. And making talking with people, making connections, going to conventions not for networking, but just to be there, just to have those relationships, just to be real in spaces with other people. That's so important.
Hmm. Are you bringing personal relations, not necessarily like personal relations? Are you bringing like family members or quirks from other people that you know into your book as well, or is that just the habit of an author?
Oh, absolutely. I don't know any authors who don't in one way or another bring things from people they know into their writing. Um, you know, I think Veronica is she's definitely got a dash of Captain Kirk in there. She's got that intrepidity, but she's also got some speech patterns from my mom and my sister, um, from friends of mine in the Royal Manticore and Navy fan club. Um, and you bring people together. You bring people, and everyone you have, I think, in your head is a product of personal relationships, characters you liked in books you read before, and they're unique, but at the same time, you can see the parts of the people that they came from.
Hmm. Good stuff. Would you consider other influences other than Star Trek? Like, would you say Firefly was a partial influence as well, or were you not much of a?
Oh, oh God, Firefly. Um, the the captain of the errant knave is about three parts Malcolm Reynolds. He's kind of he started out as this horrible person. I mean, and every time I came back through the draft, his humanity and maybe a little bit of a twisted sense of decency came back through the drafting part of it. I mean, he's still not a nice person, but he's not the monster he was in the rough draft. And a lot of his redeeming qualities came from Mal.
Well, that's not a bad thing to base it off of, since eventually we hope the Firefly series will be extended. But Whedon's so busy with Avengers 2, Avengers 3,
I
Agent of
loved
Shield.
Avengers, and I have Agents of Shield in my TV to watch
Mm,
backlog.
yeah,
I don't know how I'm going to go back and watch the first part of the season knowing what happens in Winter Soldier.
I know. I've put off watching Agents of Shield all this year just because of school and stuff. But
Mhm.
I really feel that especially after watching Winter Soldier twice, I'm like, how does that going to affect the TV series? Like, well, that was the end of Agents of Shield. That was the quickest season ever.
It's like, um, but it's like I want to see what happens to Coulson, so I'm going to watch it.
I know.
Mhm. I still thought Coulson should have been the Vision, but now I know that Paul Bettany's going to be playing the Vision, so
Who's that?
he's the voice of Jarvis.
Oh, him. Okay, okay.
Yeah, he had this interview a few months ago where he said basically, um, I used to come in and just do the lines, but they must have noticed that I'm not actually doing anything, so they gave me a physical part.
It's like, we're paying you to be a voice actor, but now we want you to be an actor. Can you do that? Sure.
Hmm.
Uh, uh,
Yeah.
what are some of your expectations, though, of this next Avengers film? Because I mean, they've done such a great job with the first one. They've done such an amazing job tying in all of these other stories as well. I mean, I still have to watch Thor
Mhm.
2, but I mean, still, it's like, then you got Guardians of the Galaxy is going to have a small part as well. It's like,
I love the concept of Guardians of the Galaxy, first off.
mm,
It's totally like, DC just goes, oh, well, we don't think people are going to get Wonder Woman in a movie, and Marvel's just like, have a talking raccoon.
and a tree.
Hmm. And it's, I'm not even sure what's going to happen in Avengers 2 because Marvel they've been doing so much with their storytelling, and it's just awesome to watch.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm a little, yeah, I'm a little bit worried what's going to happen in Phase 3.
with Avengers 3 and the Captain America 3 and
Hmm.
the Hulk films that are coming out and Ant-Man
Yeah,
and
mhm. Yeah, especially since Downey has made it clear that he's not going to be back after Avengers 2.
give him time. I think he'll be back.
Hmm. Yeah, I, if Downey's not back after Avengers 2, I'm hoping, I think that we are going to see one hell of a send off for Iron Man.
Well, it depends on how they can tie that in. I mean, they haven't even really introduced anyone other than the quote unquote pseudo Mandarin. Uh,
Hmm.
but because they don't want to go they don't want to go the fantasy world that is Iron Man. They want to go keep it more realistic and technical based. So I think
Hmm.
it'll be very difficult to see. They you know what they may do is they may throw in War Machine just because.
Hmm.
Just to tie things in, just to say, hey, here you go, you finally
Yeah.
have a movie.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, there have been times over the decades where roadies just straight up stood in for Tony as Iron Man, and
Hmm,
I could see at the end of Avengers 2, say, Tony handing off the mantle to Rhodey permanently.
that would be interesting. I'd like to see that.
Mhm. I would too. I mean, it goes back to representation. You cannot have too much representation. It would be so awesome to see Rhodes and Wilson in the same movie,
Hmm.
kicking ass and taking names together.
You know, throw in an Iron Fist, and you'll have like
Hmm.
the old style Avengers there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what is as an author, as a comic, as a fan, as a nerd, as a geek, as a person
Hmm.
that encompasses everything that is, um, well, that is geeky and that is what we love.
Hmm.
You know, where do you see that this next generation of films, of writers, of authors, of comic creators? Where do you see it going?
Oh my gosh. As part of that next generation of authors, I really want to see exploring the boundaries, exploring the fringes. We have so many stories that are in this kind of traditional adventure space, and I want to see people taking that in different directions. And one of the people that I think is really brilliant about that is Susan Jane Bigelow and her Extra Humans series. And she takes the premise of superheroes and interstellar travel and turns it into this world spanning conspiracy, and what she's done with it is great, and I'm really looking forward with bated breath to her next book.
Hmm. I've never read her actually, so I don't
Mhm.
know too much about her.
Yeah, she's on Twitter. um, I met her back I met her on Twitter. We've never met face to face back in '09.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the books that she's written are just fantastic. And another author I really want to, give some love to, although she's not sci-fi per se, uh, is Imogen Binney. Her novel Nevada is just, take the classic road novel, add a transgender main character, and a whole bunch of those unique personal insecurities, and just hit the frappe button on the whole blender.
Nice.
It's a really unique experience, and I recommend it to everybody.
I'll add that to my to read list there. I think that's great to see. And um, let's. I had a couple of other questions here for you too.
Hmm.
Yeah, when it comes down to it, I think you've mentioned your inspirations, especially with the sci-fi aspect of things.
Mhm.
What is your source of, what is your creative impulse, I should say?
That's an interesting question. Um, I've got two major things behind me, and one of them is my own theory of writing is that everybody writes a story that they needed to have read.
Mm,
So, you know, I wrote Veronica because growing up I needed to read that kind of character who looked a little bit more like myself. And another thing is, um, when I was in seventh grade, one of the books that I read for my English classes back then was The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. And this was about 20 or so years after the end of the Vietnam War. So that was still very much in
the
that
writing.
was still very much in the public milieu. I mean, now we've kind of replaced Vietnam with the Gulf War and the Iraq War, but back then Vietnam was still the biggest thing that we had because the generation's parents were still the veterans of that war. And what
Mm,
he wrote was absolute occurrence is irrelevant. Something can have happened and be a total lie, and something can never have happened and be truer than the truth. And that has just stuck with me ever since.
mm,
And I think because we fiction writers, write about things that haven't happened, we owe it to ourselves and our author, or we owe it to ourselves and our readers to be that bleedingly honest form of the truth that is so true that you cannot tell a story that actually happened because it would be too painful.
mm. Hence the role of fiction.
Mhm. You know,
Mm,
back I and even when you go back, way back to the very beginning of fiction, Jane Austen was writing that bleedingly, desperately true truth about relationships back in the early 1800s.
mm.
You look at her works, and on the one hand, they're very bright and fluffy and flowery, and on the other hand, there's this undercurrent of desperation that she must have felt,
Was,
to be taken seriously in a society that did not like women.
mm. No, I agree. I mean,
Hmm.
one of the classic authors now, I'm sure she went through extreme circumstances just to get her work even viewed, for that matter, rather than ignored. It's
Hmm.
something that we won't be able to experience unless, knock on wood, we end up getting time travel.
Hmm. Yeah. And on the more fun side of things, one of my greatest influences as a woman who writes is C.L. Moore. And she just wrote these wondrous, ass kicking fantasy stories with Jeriel of Jory and her huge sword, and the fact that she was just the equal of any man who crossed her path, and she dared anyone to prove otherwise. And no one ever did.
Interesting. I
Hmm.
you're opening up a world of books that I haven't had a chance to read yet. Now I'm gonna have to start going through this and start. You'll have to give me your list, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Hmm. Okay, I will happily do that. I love giving people reading lists.
um, when you look at the younger generation that are coming up after you,
Hmm.
they see your work, they see the challenges you've gone through, and they see you as an inspirational person.
Hmm.
Um,
I hope
I,
so.
I hope so too, because you are. So
Thank you.
when it comes down to it, how can they inspire the generation that comes after them?
be true. I mean, we live in a hard era. There's no denying that. And to inspire the people who come after you, you have to give them hope without giving them false hope.
Hmm.
And that means being honest and reasonable about the risks that you face, but telling them you can get through this. I got through this. We're all in this together, and the human race, and I do wholeheartedly believe this, the human race is so much greater than the worst things that we do. And we need to remember this. We need to be part of the world, and we need to not give up. It's, you know, even even the world of Star Trek did not look to the people living in the early 21st century like it was going to turn out to be Star Trek. It looked bleak. You had the eugenics wars in the past. You had World War III in the future, and I think there were people in the 20 teens of the Star Trek world who looked at the world around them and thought, how is the human race ever going to get past this? And we did. And I think we can.
It's possible.
Mm-hmm.
It's very possible. Are we willing to work towards that? That's the main thing. Are we willing to put aside petty differences and aspects of faith and everything along that line that isn't,
Yeah.
while personally I'm sure it's necessary for certain people, as a human race, before that was even indoctrinated into many people, it wasn't there. We just had fire, a rock, a wheel, and cave drawings. So
Mm-hmm.
at some point in time, mentality and perseverance were more key.
Mm-hmm.
But
And to me, everything that is to be human is to tell a story.
mm,
Um, you have you grow up with stories. You become, how many times have you heard people talk about their life story in an inspirational or a warning context? It's the human race is an ongoing conversation.
I think I hear that every time someone comes on the show.
Hmm.
It depends on how much they're willing to let everyone else know about that as well too. It's interesting because I've always said, for those that everyone has a story to tell. It's just it's up to me as a host to get them to tell it. Hopefully, I'm doing that.
I hope so. Thank you.
um, when it comes down to it, though, you know, what do you care most deeply for?
Uh, Sorry, my phone just.
That's okay.
I forgot to put my phone on silence.
I didn't hear it. So
Oh, okay. Well, what do I care most deeply for? Um, I care about seeing that people have what they need in their life. On a personal level, I mean, my nephews my nephews constantly inspire me to be a better person than I have been. And I think everybody who looks at a little life that is related to them has that instinct, that impulse to be more than who they are. And for me right now, that's a huge thing. I for for my friends who for my friends, especially my friends in the transgender community, I want to make sure that they have, the characters that they can look at, that they need to remind them that there are people like them who are out there, and that they matter. I mean, my dream actress to play Veronica, if I ever actually get to the point of making a movie of the Aquarius Ascendant universe, would be Jamie Clayton, who's currently doing Dirty Work on HBO.
Oh, okay.
Or wait, that's on the internet. That's on YouTube. That's not HBO.
Oh, it's a web series.
Hmm.
Oh, cool.
Yep. And she plays a trans woman who is paying for her transition by cleaning up murder scenes.
Interesting. There was a series I saw
Hmm.
with is it Mira Sorvini?
Hmm.
I was back in 2006, and she was it was a transition as well.
Hmm.
He to she, but she was an assassin.
Hmm.
She would actually go around and kill people, and it was called Hit or Miss,
Yeah,
and
I've seen that.
that was a great show. I loved it.
There are parts of that show that I have to take like 5 minutes at a time
Oh yeah.
because they're just a little bit too close to the heart for
Mm,
me. But overall, I enjoy the show. There are some problematic moments, but that's generally true with any media that involves members of minorities.
mhm.
I just wish that they had gotten. I just wish that they had gotten a trans woman to play the main character. I think that would have made her a little bit more real because she would be occupying the skin that she is in as opposed to
Acting.
occupying somebody else's.
Yeah.
Um, One of the books that I read for my women's studies class this semester is about the portrayal of Asian American women in media,
Mm,
and the woman who wrote it said that one of the most interesting things for her was going to a showing of Miss Saigon and realizing that this is the way it's portrayed is very white focused, and yet the women on stage were real Asian American women who were inhabiting their roles in only the way that a woman who inhabits that skin can.
mm. You,
So, we need people who are inhabiting that skin to be able to tell their stories, and I think that's part of why I wanted to do what I do.
and you do a good job of it, definitely for sure. Um, Two final questions I have here. Um, what do you fear the most?
What do I fear the most? Oh my God. Um, Actually, it's not even bad reviews. I've had people straight up say this story this story needs so much work to be salvaged, and it's kind of like not this specific story, but
Mm,
stories that I've submitted. I've gotten back with somebody basically saying you've got a kernel of an idea here, but you need to express it in a different way, and that doesn't worry me. What worries me is, you know, what worries me is seeing the world being unkind to people that desperately need kindness.
mm, no. Yeah, it's difficult. But you're going to experience that no matter what. At least you don't you're willing to get valid criticism, and I mean valid in
Hmm.
terms of being valid criticism, not valid or not criticism being
Yeah.
mean criticism. A lot of
Hmm.
people can't handle that, and it comes
Yeah.
down to people that are willing to grow a thick skin. That's definitely needed in any industry, especially being an author or being
Yeah.
a filmmaker like myself and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
I remember getting a review that had some critical details in it, and there was there was a person who commented on that review that said who said no, this is unfair, and I'm like, no, it's perfectly fair. This is her impression of my work, and I as artists, we have to take the criticism with the praise, or the praise is meaningless.
Hmm. And there's some interesting news on the Avengers: Age of Ultron that
Mm-hmm.
I'll forward a link to you as well. But as well as Star Wars and Guardians of the Galaxy. Ironically, things that we were just speaking of. And there's going to be a third Minions film. And then Arnold Schwarzenegger is playing in another King Conan film.
Oh gosh, oh my, I want to see Conan, but I'm also a little bit worried about 60-some-year-old Arnold playing Conan again.
He's like gray beard and everything. It's pretty
Uh-huh.
impressive, I have to admit. And then Arrow as well is getting a third season, so that's awesome.
That is
Uh,
awesome.
and I don't know if you've seen the Flash spin-off of it, which
I haven't yet.
oh my gosh, there's like a 5-minute trailer of it. You have to see. It's incredible. They've done. I don't know if you followed Arrow or how much you followed of it, but they did a great job with the characters. They did an amazing job with the Suicide Squad, and they even did. You even heard Harley Quinn's voice in one of the Suicide Squad cells. So I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like awesome.
Yes.
And she said to class.
Anything with Harley Quinn in it, I would watch.
So I think they're bringing her in for possibly a season 3 touch. We'll see how that goes, but it's funny. She goes, he sounds like he's having problems. I'm a trained psychologist. I was like, all right, that's pretty cool.
I love her.
Oh yeah, she's such a misunderstood character, or she's been
Uh-huh.
dragged in so many different directions, and it's.
Yeah, I think fundamentally she's an anti-hero. She's got so many problems that just make her so fascinating. And I think she'd still have those problems if they cut her loose from Joker permanently.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. It's something that I'd love to see her do just her own series, or in working with Suicide Squad. I think that would be pretty crazy in itself because they're all nuts.
Mm.
Another series that I found interesting, and I know we're kind of going off on a tangent, but is I don't know if you've seen Orphan Black yet. I think that's
I haven't seen Orphan Black yet, but I've seen a bazillion photo sets on Tumblr.
it's a good series. I have to admit. For if you get a chance, like grab season 1, and they're just starting season 2. They're about 5 episodes in. Really worth it. Just an amazing actress. She plays so many different versatile roles, and the twists and the conspiracies and all that stuff. It's pretty incredible.
And it's like the first thing I knew about Orphan Black was that one of the main characters was a lesbian who went to the University of Minnesota.
It's the same character playing that. The main character playing all of those roles.
Uh-huh.
So it's pretty incredible. Yeah, no, it's.
Yeah. And she reminds me of, as an undergraduate, I went to Augsburg College, which is literally right across the street from the U of M. So she reminds me of U of M students that I've seen on the bus.
I didn't know that. That's good to know. I guess the last question then is, now that we've segued, going back to yourself. Obviously, you're successful professionally. You're just getting, into your career in terms of from a professional aspect, and I'm sure you'll have much success in the future. Um, do you consider yourself personally successful?
Um, well, personally, yeah, I mean, my my relationship with my partner has lasted longer than a lot of marriages do these days. So that's kind of a personal success.
Hmm.
I mean, I have found a career that I like, and I'm not gonna say love yet because I've only been doing this professionally for about a year. You know how that goes.
Hmm.
But as 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 the Magic Eight Ball says, signs are trending positive. Um, I've been published a couple of times. I get a massive thrill from seeing my name on a piece of paper with a work underneath it that I wrote. That is, and then I just, as I said at the top of our interview, I just graduated, so that is kind of a big piece of paper saying you have won college. It's
Achievement unlocked.
yes, achievement unlocked, one college. Start over on expert mode, YN. Because
You
that's
do.
right after my graduation, my partner said to me, "Okay, now you're starting college over on expert mode." And it's like, yeah, I'm good enough to be, and just I've been so blessed in the last several years with for all the insecurity and all the difficulty. I feel like I'm getting to where I need to be, and that is for me, for you know, getting to where you need to be in the world and in the conversations that you have to have, that is success. So I feel like I'm personally a success.
Wonderful. That's great to hear. And is there anything that I haven't brought up that you'd love the watchers of this and the listeners of the iTunes version of this audio
Um,
aspect to know about? Because I'd like to see the book as well. You kept holding it, but you never didn't show it.
all right.
There we go.
Yep, here we go. Uh, Independent Flight comes out June 2nd. It will be immediately available on Amazon and CreateSpace. Um, $6.99 on CreateSpace, $2.99 as a Kindle download. Um, Donuts and Disasters, a 3,500 word short story, is out on Kindle, and it's been getting some good reviews. Um, it's 99 cents, which is, it's 15 minutes of reading for 99 cents. It's not a bad. I don't think it's a bad value at all. Obviously, I wrote it, so I'm a little bit. And I'm going to have a bunch of free short stories coming out this summer, um, starting with one that I've been working on called The Great Red Strike, which is based on the ancient Greek play Lysistrata.
Hmm.
And, you know, um, just more, support women, support people of color in fiction. And I would like to ask viewers and listeners to, read things that are outside of their comfort zone, read things that sound like they're kind of on the fringes of what you'd like, but you don't know if you're necessarily actually going to like them. Because, by challenging ourselves and making ourselves uncomfortable, that's how we grow.
Completely agree. Wonderful. I hate to say, Kitty, but that ends this episode of Two Geeks Talking,
Mm-hmm.
episode 373. I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and do this, and it's been a true blast. I've really enjoyed our time together.
Thank you too. Thank you for having me.
Oh, anytime, anytime. And I think of me when you sell your 10,000, your thousandth book or whatever it is, and think of all the little people and all that jazz.
All that jazz, yeah. Maybe we can do this again when Crossroads Affair comes out this fall.
By all means, please do come back on the show. I'll be happy to have you, and we'll chat more geekery and whatever movies we've missed, and maybe collaborate in terms of what may be happening in the future as well.
Thanks.
Oh, not a problem. And that, like I said, that ends this episode. I just want to thank Katie again. But you can, of course, Katie, by the way, is there a website we can go to not only see your blog, but also any other works that you've done?
My blog is artemisflightbooks.wordpress.com. I'm also on Facebook. I'm on Twitter as Wittershins_cat, and I will write that out for you because Wittershins is not a common word. Right now, I'm still building my website, so I'm hoping to have that live before the 4th of July weekend when I'm going to be at Convergence in Bloomington, Minnesota. And just one last promo that I want to do before we sign off. The Royal Manticore Navy is holding MantiCon 2015 Memorial Day weekend. Manticon.com, MANTI, is our website for the con. And prices go up on the 27th of May, so if you're interested in military science fiction, interested in meeting David Weber and Timothy Zahn, they'll be there in Bloomington, Minnesota next spring.
Nice. That's awesome. Great stuff. Now send me all of those links, those websites as well, and I'll put them on the show notes.
Absolutely.
The website.
Thanks.
And as well as the conventions you mentioned too, that'd be wonderful. So thanks everyone for listening and watching to this show. I really greatly appreciate it. You can of course see our archive of over 6 years and 600 plus interviews on our tgtmedia.com main website. You can look on our video interviews from past conventions as well as other little comedy sketch things that I've done in the past as well too on youtube.com/tgtmedia. And if you want to help support my website and of course the podcast, the show you're listening and watching to, which is completely free by the way, please support us on our Patreon account, which is of course $1 a month or $5 or however much you'd like to support us with. Patreon.com/2geekstalking, and that's the word 2, not the number 2. And tune in next interview with who do we have? Our next interview we have is going to be two of favorite creative people that we've had on in the past before, DJ Kaufman, as well as Adam Black and another creator, I can't think of her name, comic called The God Killer. The God Killer, The God Child. I think it's The God Killer. No. Anyhow, it's one of those. It's probably The God Child, and I'm messing it up. But great creative people. They'll be on next interview, and then finally the interview after that is going to be Ian McLaughlin, who is from the web series Cooked. We had one of the directors on in the past. He's also working on that show as well. We'll get to talk with him as well as many other talented and creative people that are coming on for the 42 interviews in 42 days challenge of Two Geeks Talking. Thanks everyone for listening and watching, and have a great day, everyone.